Welcome to Marketplace with Charles, where dreams are turned into reality. Marketplace is brought to you by Out of Skincare. Out of Skincare, the company that brings out the inner beauty in you as well as the outer beauty in you. Well, Marketplace is also sponsored by Kuwisa Lodge, situated at the heart of Mabalungu Nature Reserve. If tranquility is what you're looking for, then Kuwisa Lodge is the place to be. Imagine yourself sleeping, dreaming, and waking up with the big five surrounding you. What an experience. I am Charles Ngobeni. On Marketplace, we empower and equip you with tools that you need to achieve your entrepreneurial dreams. Each week, we bring you insights from experts in different fields of business, from men and women of faith. Well, today, we again meet the professor, Prof. Peter Goss, who calls himself the Prek academic in his own way. Maybe we'll explain better what Prek academic is. He is an expert in the area of governance, crisis management, and forensics. The effective management of crisis is very important responsibility in the running of any business. Crisis management presents itself in different phases. Look, just recently, in mid-August of 2019, a major contamination of about 240 tons of toxic waste accidentally occurred and affected the Msundizi River in Pietermaritzburg. You think that is too little? Think of our neighbors here, Hammanskraal. The same thing happened. Val Dam is a daily thing. With Msundizi, aquatic life was fatally affected, as well as livelihood, and the communities living down the streams were badly affected. They had to be restricted from using this water because the water was declared unsafe for human consumption. My guest today will talk about some of these important issues that we so need to know in order to continue unhindered in our business. Prof, we welcome you once again in Marketplace with Charles.
Thank you for having us, Charles.
I need you to take me briefly on crisis management. What is crisis management?
You gave some examples of violation of environmental laws.
Yes.
For example. Mm-hmm. So that would be a crisis in the main, but the dominant crisis in South Africa right now is the crisis of unethical conduct by business, corruption by business. You've heard of the debacle around one of the major multinational companies, Steinhoff, and the collapse of that organization.
Yes.
How many potential jobs might be affected someday downstream? You've heard about the Bosasa dilemma at the State Capture Commission. How many jobs are affected by the fact that Bosasa is now changed name and under liquidation? So that is the ultimate crisis where people's lives are affected so exponentially by one organization's reckless corporate governance behavior or anti-corporate governance behavior. So crisis management in the context of business is behaving the need for mitigating the lack of good corporate citizenship. A business is what we call a juristic person. It is therefore a citizen amongst the citizenry, the population.
Yeah.
A business is therefore a corporate citizen. Sometimes that corporate citizen dumps environmentally hazardous waste in a river illegally. It is certainly a crisis. Sometimes that citizen steals the monies of its investors. That is a crisis. Sometimes that citizen has conflicts of interest and behaves unethically in the boardroom. That is a crisis.
Yeah.
Sometimes that citizen is the public sector, not delivering services and pilfering public resources. That is a crisis.
Recently, we had a lot of claims about one community who suffered silicosis. Will that fall within that?
Absolutely. There are many kinds of crises. You might recall the listeriosis crisis,
Yes.
where you bought cold meats and they were somewhat contaminated and they caused lots of illness.
And we've been paid for that.
Absolutely. So these are typical crises, but look at the root of that evil. The root of that evil tends to be corporate business.
Yeah.
Hence, we combine the solution to this with good corporate governance, which includes behaving like a good corporate citizen in representing your business interest while balancing it with the interest of wider stakeholders in society.
But then what is the difference between crisis management and risk management?
Risk management is way more comprehensive. So a crisis around non-compliance with law, for example, as the examples you have sketched in the health and safety environment, is but one type of risk. So risk management is way more comprehensive than crisis management. Crisis management is reacting to threat to a large extent.
Yeah.
Risk management should be ingrained in a business. Actually, I prefer to call it opportunity, leverage, and risk management. A good business leverages opportunity. While leveraging that opportunity, risks emerge.
Yeah, yeah.
Therefore, you should also have systems in place to mitigate those risks. Some prefer to lean on the risk management side, and they ignore that risk management includes leveraging opportunity. I believe that if you want to run a successful business, you should leverage opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
And keep your eye on the possibilities of risk. As opposed to, you don't start a business thinking about failing, do you?
No, not at all.
You start a business thinking about flourishing.
You don't get married thinking of divorce.
Absolutely. So risk management sometimes is overplayed by certain professions. For example, the auditing profession sometimes emphasizes risk as a negative characteristic that needs to be mitigated. I don't believe that that's the sum total. It is an element. The sum total is also looking at the upside. When they are more comprehensive professionals, then they will refer to upside of risk. Yeah, it's simply opportunity.
But tell me, what other factors could contribute to crisis in a business?
Bad corporate governance.
Yeah, which we discussed last week.
Corporate governance, which we discussed last week. Poor corporate governance, irresponsible leadership, and unethical conduct and morality infringements by business leaders. So these are dominant to the context of us speaking to you as business people. Is business behavior that is immoral, that is not driven on good values, that is driven on unethical conduct. And of course, the fruit of that, the objective of it is really to be unethical in order to pocket more. To make more profit.
But then what are the obvious consequences of lack of crisis management?
Well, if you don't have a system in place in your organization to respond when indeed a major risk emerges, you can end up with no business. In the US, an energy company called Enron is one of the biggest known collapses in corporate governance in the world. The impact of Enron is still being felt today. It's almost 2.5 decades later. Families have been destroyed by Enron's collapse around the world. So pension funds were destroyed by Enron's collapse. So the implications are really far-reaching when crisis emerges that stems from bad business behavior, unethical business behavior, or failures in corporate governance. So the crisis management phraseology has come into being more and more because of major corporate failures.
Look, in the light of the recent poor corporate governance, especially here in South Africa, should the judiciary hold the directors personally liable? What's your view on that?
Yes, our Companies Act makes provision for personal liability of delinquent directors. In other words, directors who don't behave within the norms of running the company along the lines of good corporate governance and compliance with the Companies Act in particular being that number one instrument for good corporate governance. The judiciary makes sure that if somebody is brought before the courts for failings of good corporate governance, the judiciary should, of course, ensure that it gives a fair hearing and then takes appropriate action should it find evidence that justifies that somebody should be punished. Or a certain corporate behavior should be corrected, with implications for those directors of that corporate that misbehaved.
But why is it that it took us too long to implement that? I mean, when you look into our government today, it's only lately that we see the government official paying the penalties, paying from their own pocket. Like the recent case with the public protector, you know, we never heard of this before.
Yes.
And yet, it was there in our statutes.
Absolutely. We scream for these results, and we discussed in our last segment last week, should we be writing more laws to mitigate against crises that we experience? Yeah. I believe we should simply be implementing laws for crises that we experience. Mm-hmm. I think as you become more and more exposed to crisis, I hope one gets more and more serious about taking stronger and stronger actions in relation to that crisis. I mean, former Minister Batabile Dlamini also wasn't in trouble with paying personally for certain delinquencies. Yeah. And as you mentioned, others right now. Mm-hmm. So we hope that this is the new wave that's coming at us, and it will be sustainable over the long term, that repercussions for business leaders, repercussions for political leaders become more and more the order of the day.
Then we'll have a better country. Because, you know, if there are no repercussions, why should I bother?
You shouldn't write law if you don't establish repercussions. Uh-huh. That's the problem. And these environmentally hazardous behaviors, not many companies, directors or CEOs get jailed. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Get jailed for environmental non-compliance. But the law says that it's a crime to dump hazardous waste in a river or be reckless in the transportation of that hazardous waste. Yeah.
But why is business risk and crisis management such an integral part of running a great business?
So let's go back to the philosophy of, if you start a business, you start with an idea. Yes. Excuse me. That idea is in essence going to culminate in your solution, your service offering. You leverage that idea as your opportunity, and you look to generate value from that opportunity. As you engage that process, you will consider what will go right, and if it goes right, how will I ride that white horse? Yeah. What will go wrong, and if it goes wrong, how will I rein in that dark horse? So think of it as crisis management and risk in a similar fashion. The worst case scenario is the dark horse runs away with you. Crisis management. Because it could run way off the veld onto a tar road and hurt itself and hurt you. Risk management, opportunity leverage, is a business norm that one should establish. As you leverage opportunity, there's the possibility that things might go wrong. So you foresee these opportunities. You try to foresee as many as you can. You don't foresee all. You could never foresee all. So in that foreseeing them, you're actually engaging with risk management. You're saying, what could go wrong? And if it does go wrong, how will I mitigate it? But you're also saying, how much can I live with? If you take an opportunity and you start a business, you are raising your risk tolerance and appetite already. You're saying, I can tolerate so much risk, and I have an appetite for starting a business which perhaps might not succeed. But you're not thinking about not succeeding. You're thinking about winning. Yeah. If you do not succeed, of course, then you put in other risk mitigation measures. So we have a language called tolerance and appetite. How much risk am I willing to live with? What is my appetite for taking more risk?
Let's talk about those measures that one can take to prevent the crisis in the business.
One, make sure you have proper risk management measures in place for the major risks facing your organization. So many of us refer to a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Yeah. We take academic liberty and we refer to a SWOT analysis: strength, shortcoming, opportunity, and threat. Every business should consider its strengths, opportunity, its shortcomings. I don't like the word weaknesses, hence I don't refer to SWOT, I refer to SOT. It's shortcomings. Shortcomings that you need to mitigate or guard against.
Yes, yes.
Opportunities, leverage more of the strengths and other opportunities. And then, of course, now crisis, threat. What could destroy us? That's where crisis comes in, for threat. What threats exist that could destroy us? Take what's happening now in Johannesburg, the city of Johannesburg, for example, in the metropolitan area, where there's an attack on business people that are running informal businesses in the city of Johannesburg, for example. That is a serious crisis. It requires a crisis response, a crisis incident management framework. We should have foreseen that crisis as the city of Johannesburg and been ready to mitigate against it. One crisis management measure is the gathering of intelligence in advance of the crisis. So if you know what your threats are, you gather intelligence to foresee the possibility of that threat and to mitigate against it, perhaps before it even happens.
But then what is the overall value of the need to plan for business crisis?
Exactly what I said. One threat can destroy you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look at a poor hawker in the middle of Johannesburg with a little shop that suddenly gets attacked by people, by mischievous criminals, creating the environment for a riot. Right? So if you don't plan for that possibility, I mean, that's the end of your life. You just shut down your entire business, income stream, revenue stream. Your workers, your staff have lost their jobs. And this is the major part of not planning well for the possibility of crisis. Of course, amongst those measures is save for a rainy day. Amongst those measures is think about expanding your business with an alternative branch. And amongst those measures is CBD every year has at least one of these riots where people are attacked and their businesses looted. Is CBD the place to have my business? Maybe I should have it somewhere else. So these are the things you think about in crisis mitigation.
At what stage of the business do you plan for this?
Day one.
Is it before, after, or is it a continuous planning?
It's a day one process.
Yeah,
You've got to, I mean, we run a progressive business under our name, Peter Goss, Pty Limited.
Yeah.
Crisis management, corporate governance, strategic forensics, training and facilitation. From day one, starting my business, the first goal I have is to make sure I have 3 months of income in my bank account, 3 months of cash in my bank account that I can mitigate against the risk that somewhere down the line, my clients might not pay on time. Somewhere down the line, my income stream, my deal flow might freeze for a short while because of factors beyond my control. Undue delays on my client side making decisions to sign up to me. So one means of mitigating against crisis is to make sure you pad yourself with a bit of a nest egg. A good business, medium-sized business, should always be keeping about 3 months of cash flow, in my opinion, to be a sustainable business into the long term.
Look, you're also an expert in forensics.
Indeed. Our core, actually, you'd be surprised, Charles, started in 1987 when I became a policeman.
Okay. So I can see from your sitting posture.
So around 88, late 88, I became a detective. And I still fancy myself a detective today. So a lot of people still know me as a forensic auditing or forensic investigation specialist. I've written 2 books on fraud and forensics matters. My first book was The Forensic Investigation Process Step-by-Step Guidance, which I've been teaching for 20 years at the University of Johannesburg. My second book I launched in Las Vegas, the USA, at the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners Conference, Fraud Risk Governance, Step-by-Step Guidance for Fraud Risk Management and Fraud Auditing, Proactive Fraud Auditing. And then my third book was on corporate governance and illicit conduct, because the failings of business now seem to be higher and higher level, more and more complex business, and the third book addresses that. Yes.
Let's go back to forensics. Your role that you play now, can I employ you in my company? And if I were to employ you, what will be your role? What do you do?
I will tell you, and I wouldn't separate it from the corporate governance framework of your organization.
Yeah.
I will tell you what fraud could happen in your organization depending on your industry.
Yeah.
I will tell you how we can mitigate that fraud, what controls we can put in place, anti-fraud controls and actions we can put in place to mitigate that fraud. One of the means of doing that is either an anti-corruption plan or a fraud risk management plan. I will help you develop a fraud risk management plan for your organization. Then I will establish a framework for reactive forensic. I've just been talking about proactive forensics. Understanding fraud risk and having a plan to mitigate that fraud risk. Proactive forensics. Reactive forensics is when fraud is sure to happen in any organization. Fraud is sure to happen in a church. Corruption is sure to happen in a church. You asked me in our last segment about morality and collapse in certain ethical behaviors, sometimes in the religious environment. So it's sure to happen, fraud. Wherever there are people, fraud will happen. So then you must plan for reactive forensics, which is your methodology for the curtain rises, it's fraud. Certain actors step up and do certain things. One, gather all the documentation that may have been manipulated if it was available. Two, consider whether you should suspend somebody who committed the fraud because the fraud might be ongoing. Three, consider whether you should immediately open a police case or first investigate and then open a police case. Four, consider, disciplinary action against those who created the opportunity. Five, consider recovering your losses as soon as possible in relation to this matter. Six, prosecute the offender. So these are your reactive forensic measures. So fraud risk management is the proactive measure, and reactive we call forensic investigation and methodology for forensic investigation.
How does forensic differs from an internal auditor?
Oh, very different. The internal auditor's view, let's use the analogy evidence.
Yeah.
The internal auditor's view on evidence is information that validates or doesn't validate that the company is complying to certain policies, procedures, governance, norms for the organization. Okay? So his view on any information that illustrates that non-compliance or compliance is called evidence. In the forensic world, we speak of evidence as that which will be accepted by a court of law. So we talk of relevance and reliability of that evidence to a presiding officer sitting over the matter of a forensic nature, for example, a fraud. So a presiding officer will sit over a magistrate, a judge, a disciplinary committee chairperson, would preside over a matter and apply the rules of evidence, admissibility requirements of evidence, to make a decision about whether that evidence before that presiding officer is enough to find somebody guilty of a wrongdoing. That's a very big difference between the two objectives. Internal audit gives assurance about the internal controls in essence in a business. It gives advice to the business about how to mitigate those internal control shortcomings and how to mitigate or manage risk in the organization, and provide certain insights to management to assist management enhance its efforts. Forensic auditing, on the other hand, is way more adversarial. It seeks to identify the possibility that fraud might happen, and if it happens, what actions should take place.
I need to minimize this risk in my company. What should I do?
One, conduct a fraud risk assessment.
Yeah.
Conduct a corruption risk assessment. Understand where fraud or corruption can happen in your business. Two, develop a plan to mitigate those risks that you've identified. That plan is often called a fraud prevention plan, an anti-corruption plan, a fraud risk management plan. So many words used for the same thing. Develop a plan to mitigate it. Three, make sure that should you have have a fraud response plan, which is almost a crisis management plan for fraud. Who will do what if I have a fraud? Who will report to the police? Who will consider suspending the individual that committed the fraud? Who will initiate disciplinary action against this individual? When will we go to our lawyers and decide to sue this person to pay back our money that they stole? When will we get the police to help us secure bank statements after opening the police case? These are the questions that you'd answer in managing this risk of fraud, corruption, and other crises, if it's of an unethical nature.
Should I share this information with my employees?
You've got to create awareness of what the devil looks like so that people don't go towards the devil.
Okay.
And the devil, in this case, we're talking about is fraud and corruption.
Yeah.
So we've got to give our employees a sense of awareness of what is right and what is wrong. Many organizations develop a code of conduct or a disciplinary code which outlines the behaviors that are not acceptable, which then in a code of ethics outlines the behaviors which are acceptable. And we encourage those behaviors. So that's how we get our employees on site, through an awareness process. But be careful with the business. There are many stakeholders to a business than just its employees and its management. There are suppliers. There are business partners. There are various other, general society, the population at large that has an interest in understanding how well you behave. And if you behave well, more customers will come towards you. Customers are also stakeholders. So what you're saying about how do I include my employees, I would say expand that to including all stakeholders in your fraud risk management process.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. And if someone needs to get hold of you, I'm saying this because we ran out of time now. And I still had more questions to ask, but unfortunately time does not permit. If someone needs more information, if someone needs to hire you for forensic, for crisis management, for anything, how do they get hold of you and how do they do that?
The best place is to go to my website, www.petergoss.co.za.
Yeah.
And you can just log in and send us a message, and we'll respond promptly.
Well, for me to get hold of me, the best place is charlesngobeni.com or Instagram, Charles_Ngobeni. You can also go on Facebook and like me. I would love to hear from you. Did you enjoy the episode? Does the program help you? Let's communicate. Well, God bless you. See you next time, same channel.
Join Marketplace with Charles on an 11-day tour of the Holy Land from the 8th of December 2019. Take the route Israel traveled to the Promised Land, cross over the Red Sea, and float on the Dead Seas, the lowest point on earth with amazing healing properties. Experience the vibe of Jericho and cruise on the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, the hometown of Jesus. Visit the pools of Bethesda, Nazareth, Bethlehem, and many more. Walk where Jesus walked and see the Bible come alive. If beautiful memories and an enriched spirit is what you are looking for, then join us in taking Jesus to the marketplace. For more information, call us on +27 72 123 0078 or email israel@artofskincare.co.za.